Number 10. Sideburn the Regenerating Planet. When Galactica, the daughter of Galactus, is looking for her next meal in issue 1 of her self-titled comic, she finds Earth, a lovely little snack. But while looking at her dinner option, she comes upon Wolverine. Realizing his mutant regenerative abilities, she formulates an idea of using a bit of his harvested DNA with a bit of celestial power to create Sideburn the Regenerating Planet, a planet-sized Galactus meal that would grow back after each feasting. The perfect unlimited food source that would give her billions of years of meals. Unfortunately, she just as quickly realizes that a planet made up of Canadian mutant DNA like this would be highly unstable. Unfortunate, because I'd love to see this guy floating through the galaxy of the regular Marvel Universe.
Number 9. Cancerous Professor X. In the alternate universe of Earth 10,011, otherwise known as the Cancerverse, death was defeated by life and the ancient eldritch beings known as the Many-Angled One. The heroes of this Earth began to worship the Many-Angled Ones, who transformed the heroes, granting them new powers, but also corrupting and mutating them due to the Many-Angled One's demonic natures. One of the consequences of this was that many of the heroes became deformed by cancerous tumors running amok. Although many of the X-Men were affected, such as Wolverine, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Storm, the most terrifying of these beings was Professor X, who developed a massive cranium as well as multiple glowing red eyes. Now, Professor X can be pretty creepy at the best of times, but this is taking it to a whole other level.
Number 8. Franken Castle. After he was taken out by Daken on orders from Norman Osborn during the Dark Reign event, Frank Castle, yes, the Punisher, was revived by the Legion of Monsters as an undead zombie-like monster known as Franken Castle. The Legion resurrected Frank to recruit him in their fight against the villain known as Hellsguard, who was systematically killing off monsters using samurai-like assassins. Although he originally refused, Frank got involved after seeing innocent child monsters being dispatched as well, and that is not something Frank is willing to abide. He went on to slay hordes of Hellsguard's men. It's honestly an incredibly interesting moment in Frank Castle's history, and it got this version of Frank moved to Earth 666. He also nearly enacted revenge against Daken, being stopped by Wolverine before he was returned to his human form through the Bloodstone. Number 7. Blue Goo. Maybe this is more just really weird as opposed to a horrible moment, but thanks to sci-fi writer Orson Scott Card of Ender's Game fame, we got a version of Iron Man who, due to a virus that led to the passing of his mother and affected Tony upon his birth, lives in constant pain unless he's coated in this really strange blue goo created by his father, which was developed as a sort of bio armor. It does the trick, but it's still rather odd, and fans were not fans of this change. Personally, I think a lot of the changes made to Iron Man's backstory in the Ultimate Universe were really interesting, and it was different from 616, which made it fun, but the blue skin was an interesting choice to say the least. This point is a little unfair as Marvel decided to retcon this out of his history, but that don't change the fact that it did indeed happen, and it was rather strange too. Number 6. Hulk eating people. The Incredible Hulk has always sort of tiptoed the line between being a hero and being a monster. In the 616 universe, we can more often than not say he is a hero, but in the Ultimate Universe, not a chance. For starters, his origin already starts Bruce Banner off on a bad foot. He is made to feel inferior by both his ex and other heroes, which is what spurs him to become the Hulk in order to feel bigger, I guess? Sounds like a supervillain to me. That's because he basically is. After he transforms, he goes on a rampage through New York, taking out more than 800 people and even eating some of them. Sure, the idea haunts Bruce, which we learn in the Ultimate Hulk solo comic as he recounts the feeling of eating a person, but there isn't really a redemption here. Also, what the hell is up with the whole Freddie Prinze Jr. thing? It's hilarious, but what? Number 5. Lack of Sabretooth. Sabretooth has always been a pretty terrifying dude. He ain't nice, he's extremely violent, and extremely hard to bring down. And even more so in the Ultimate Universe, he becomes bonded with adamantium similar to Wolverine and even has retractable bone claws out of his forearms, also like Wolverine. Doesn't really need them, as he also eventually has his naturally occurring claws on each fingertip as well as his fangs and teeth laced with adamantium to just bump up the amount of absolutely bloody carnage he could produce. If this sounds awesomely terrifying, it's because it is, which makes it a shame when he doesn't really do much. Sabretooth in the Ultimate Universe, similar to 616, is kind of just a lackey to Weapon X and then later to Magneto. It just feels wrong to make such an imposing villain more imposing but not give him much to do. Number 4. Sabretooth vs. Angel. Oh, actually, there is one thing of note here that Sabretooth does. One thing that was incredibly brutal and unnecessary in true Ultimate Universe fashion. In the aftermath of Magneto's ultimatum wave, he and Sabretooth waited in the Arctic for the heroes to come and try to apprehend them in Ultimatum issue number 4 from 2009. The first to arrive was Warren Worthington III, or Angel, who came crashing through a window with a punch straight to Magneto's big old face. But after Magneto gave the go-ahead, Sabretooth pounced at the crash-landed mutant, scratching the living hell out of his back, tore off one of his wings with his teeth, seeming to enjoy the brief cannibalism, and then stomped on Warren's neck with his boot, taking out the mutant in another of the Ultimate Universe's unceremonious dispatching of a fan-loved character. Thanks, Ultimate Universe! Thank you so much. Number 3. Dormammu and Doctor Strange. Speaking of unceremonious dispatching, Angel wasn't the only hero to meet his end in issue number 4 of Ultimatum. Right at the beginning of the comic, it seems that the Hulk's rampaging has led to Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum, and he begins just smashing everything, including magical items, which results in a blinding flash of light. Next thing we know, the dread Dormammu is free from the dark dimension and is in magical conflict with Doctor Strange. But Dormammu seems more than confident that he won't be defeated by the Sorcerer. It takes merely a few pages before Dormammu uses the Sorcerer Supreme's own sash, belt, cloak thingy, constricting it around Strange's body so tightly that it explodes his head in an extremely grotesque couple of panels that I'm not sure we're even allowed to show. Just like that, the normally extremely powerful Dr. Stephen Strange is out of the picture. Number 2. Hawkeye's family tragedy. Say what you will about the ultimate version of Clint Barton. He is much less heroic than his 616 counterpart, he is a S.H.I.E.L.D. sponsored killer, and he is much more of a secret agent. Ultimately, he is the basis for the MCU's version of the character, from his look to his family. But what the Ultimate Universe did to his family, or more specifically what Black Widow did to them, I should say, will likely never be seen in the MCU, which we should all thank our lucky stars for. As we talked about all the way up at the 10th point, Natalia Romanova did not turn out to be a great gal. She was working for the Liberators, a group of heroes from around the globe who were opposed to the amount of power held by the United States thanks to S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Ultimates. It was a cool, realistic concept, and one that could have opened up the comics to more worldwide inclusiveness. Instead, it was kind of just a way to make America seem superior. After Natalia's revelation as a traitor, she organized the assassination of her longtime Black Ops partner Hawkeye's entire family, even personally taking out his son Callum. For her crimes, Clint does put an arrow between her eyes in Ultimates 2's final chapter, as she is in a hospital bed thanks to Tony Stark giving her brain damage. It doesn't really help the whole situation. And in at number 1, Peter Parker comes back to life. One of the key things about the Ultimate Universe was supposed to be its realism, or at least its realism in a universe full of superheroes, sorcerers, gods, and monsters. One of the aspects of said realism was the fact that death would be permanent, which is about as real as you can get. The only problem was that didn't seem to last. One of the best things about the Ultimate Universe was Ultimate Spider-Man. It's regarded as not only the best thing out of that universe, but one of the best Spider-Man stories ever told. His eventual death after saving many people in Ultimatum, taking a bullet for Captain America, and then fighting and defeating Norman Osborn and the Six was equally as amazing, if not tragic and emotional. It also paved the way for another one of the Ultimate Universe's best, Miles Morales. So in order to make that amazing story and all the emotional weight it had going for it mean absolutely nothing, what do you know? Peter Parker wakes up in some underground laboratory, seemingly revived. Yay! Coming in at number 10 is Frankenstein's monster. In case you have never heard of Frankenstein's monster, the creature was originally the creation of English author Mary Shelley, who wrote a novel in 1818 titled Frankenstein that tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist who creates a sentient undead creature in a scientific experiment. It's actually a very deep and somewhat moving story. Now, the Marvel Universe version of Frankenstein and his monster isn't too different. In 1788, Victor Frankenstein left his family estate in Geneva, Switzerland to study natural science. Victor became obsessed with the idea of recreating life and began robbing graveyards in order to acquire body parts that he then stitched together and subjected to chemical treatments and electrolysis. But it horrified the scientist and he fled, leaving the monster alone in the world. Frankenstein, being an undead being, is essentially immortal and immune to disease. He can lift around 10 tons, he has superhuman stamina and durability, and he can replace any lost limbs with other people's limbs, which is both creepy and kinda cool. Number 9. Vampire by Night. I honestly didn't know there was also a vampire by night, and she is actually related to the werewolf by night. Nina Price, the niece of Jack Russell, the werewolf by night, is also an ancestor of Grigory Russoff. Nina's mother, Lisa Russell, was a victim of the same curse as Jack Russell, except things changed for this branch of the family when an altercation with a sorcerer named Glitter Knight freed Lissa from being a werewolf. Lissa married and had Nina with a wealthy man named Mr. Price. Unfortunately, the werewolf curse continued to Nina, but at some point, Nina was attacked by a vampire, which altered the curse for Nina and caused her to be both a werewolf and vampire in one. By day, Nina Price seemed to be a normal human, but once the sun goes down, she becomes a vampire, which is a good way of getting around the whole sunburning weakness. Due to the werewolf's curse though, Nina does become a white wolf during the full moon, but she uses her father's money and status to reserve a zoo or park, caging herself there until the full moon was over and she was no longer an animal. However, Nina had no problem using her supernatural abilities to harm criminals. Rightfully so. Nerds, if you are enjoying this video, I call upon you to hit the like button. It is all you have to do to show us your support here at Top 10 Nerd. Number 8. Reptile. While accompanying his parents on an archaeological dig, Humberto Lopez and his family discovered a fossilized amulet. Humberto eventually took possession of this fossil, which activated one day when a rock slide occurred, nearly burying him. Berto ran as fast as he could, and once he was far away, he noticed that his legs had transformed into those of a dinosaur. That's because the amulet that Berto and his family discovered was magically created by the Hag of the Pits to imbue its bearer with the abilities of prehistoric animals as well as empathic communication with them to defend said animals when the time came. His powers were also later augmented with pin particles to allow him to alter his size. Now originally, Reptile could only transform certain parts of his body into different aspects of dinosaurs, like the wings of a pterodactyl, the tail of a stegosaurus, the head of a parasaur, and the legs of a velociraptor, that kind of thing. He could also only maintain one transformation at a time. He could even just enhance his senses like vision and hearing, but eventually Reptile was able to fully transform into a complete dinosaur or even other prehistoric animals like insects, which gave him enhanced healing.
Number 7. Marvel Zombies. It's an entire pantheon of characters, from Spider-Man to Hulk to Captain America, but all zombified. The zombie versions of beloved heroes were first introduced in the pages of Ultimate Fantastic Four and became instant hits. In typical Marvel marketing genius, Marvel spun the zombies into their own book written by none other than Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman is the same bearded guy behind a television show you might know called The Walking Dead. The comics ran from December 2005 to April 2006. It starts in an alternate Earth called Earth 2149, where an unknown hero crash lands from another dimension. He comes with a, quote, hunger, which infects the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four, along with basically every other major superhero you can think of. It's intense, and the adventures of the zombie heroes usually have more mayhem than most mainstream comics do in their entire run. It's all about damage and impact, and oh boy does Kirkman deliver on that. Peter Parker eats Aunt May. I'm serious, look it up. After an episode of the Disney Plus series called What If Zombies, there were talks of Disney also creating a spin-off series based on and named after the Marvel Zombies, so keep an eye out.
Number 6. The Yeti. This Yeti is relegated to another universe because of the series it appears in, which was intended to be, good for young readers and children, and which was said to exist outside of the main continuity. This Yeti we are talking about here appears in Spidey Super Stories in issue 16. Oh boy. In this team-up book, we see Spider-Man go on adventures that are more kid-friendly when it comes to reading, ideally therefore serving the purpose of helping kids learn how to read, which is important. The Yeti hails from Earth 57780, and while he might seem like a monster by the end of the story, Spider-Man, also of Earth 57780, seems to have ascertained that the Yeti really is not a bad guy, but is just homesick. He's just stealing a lot of ice cream. So he attempts to help the Yeti by getting him safely home so he can be cold again. Yay.
Number 5, Morbius, the living vampire. It's Morbius' world and we're just living in it. He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 in 1971. The story goes, in a desperate attempt to save his own life as he suffers from a rare blood disease, Dr. Mike Morbius turns to a cure that uses vampire bat DNA because of course he does. It mutates him into a half-vampire, half-human monster. It's Morbiclock out there, and Morbius was actually initially kind of a bad guy. He fought Spider-Man and Blade before becoming a vigilante justice sort of anti-hero who struggles with the insatiable lust for blood. He's also desperate to find the cure to his vampirism. Honestly, in the comics, Morbius looks way scarier and monstrous than the Laughingstock movie. I think it's one of those things where the cartoon and artistic medium is much better at portraying the monster than Jared Leto is.
Number 4. MCU Gargantos. Gargantos is one of the monsters from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that I thought, might be one of the big bads of that movie. Instead, I was wrong, and the beast was used simply as a distraction. Seemingly modeled after the comic book character Shuma Gorath, Disney and Marvel decided against using the name of that character for copyright reasons, and so instead decided to use a name that solely belonged to them. Enter Gargantos. Although in the comics, Gargantos is less of a magical monster and instead is kinda like your typical multi-tentacled, one-eyed sea monster. In the film, it takes the combined efforts of Sorcerer Supreme Wong and Dr. Stephen Strange to defeat the beast, and Strange even pulls out some magical monster tricks of his own to stop Gargantos. While Gargantos appears in a multiversal film, him being based off of Shuma Gorath would likely also make him a multiversal monster just straight up.
Number 3, Ghost Rider. Who could forget Johnny Blaze, one of the Ghost Riders set out to hunt down earthly baddies and drag them kicking and screaming to hell where they belong. The legacy of the Ghost Rider began in the pre-Marvel age with a ghostly cowboy who hunted the prairie of the American frontier. But the modern version is a stunt biker, Johnny Blaze, who becomes possessed by the demon Zarathos and becomes a flame-headed skeleton with a cool bike and fancy leather jacket, hunting down bad guys in the name of vengeance. At times, he's the bad guy himself, being the not polished hero that has no problem taking lives. At others, he fights with the other Marvel heroes to take down bigger foes. I mean, he looks badass, can we be honest here, and he's definitely one of my favorite Marvel monsters.
Number 2. Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme is the Dark Doctor Stephen Strange we see as is showcased in the Disney Plus What If streaming series in the Season 1 episode What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands. In this episode, Strange becomes obsessed with getting back Christine Palmer after losing her in a car accident instead of, losing his hands, because Christine was his heart, get it? Because her death is considered an absolute point in time, the spirit of the Ancient One returns to Strange to remind him that he cannot do anything to bring her back. Strange doesn't like that answer and is like, I'm still gonna do stuff, so he gets split in twain, with one half of him choosing to do whatever it takes to get Christine back, because the Ancient One's like, I'm not gonna let that happen, just cut you in half. This prompts him to turn to the dark arts, absorbing various creatures and monsters from the universe in order to get as much power as is needed to reverse Christine's death. In the end, this Strange of the multiverse becomes more monster than man, defeating his other half by reabsorbing him and breaking the universe to bits when he disregards all warnings and brings Christine back to life anyways once more. Doesn't even work out well because Christine's like, dude, you're like super evil, I'm like not here for this.
Number 1, Shuma Gorath. Quote, before all was, I was. Before time was, I waited. I fed on the screaming souls of the universe. I drank the spoiled milk of dead stars. I am the emptiness outside all understanding. I am Shuma Gorath. Is a pretty sweet way to introduce yourself. His character design is next to none as one of the great old ones who first appeared in a 1972 comic called Journey into Mystery Volume 2. This tentacle monster more so looks like a freak of nature than a typical monster. He's the ruler of hundreds of dimensions and comes to the Earth realm millions of years ago along with the other old ones. Around 1 million BC, he was banished from Earth by a time traveler sorcerer named Sea Sneg. It was witnessed by Doctor Strange, who hoped to defeat the Ancient One so his master didn't have to die, but obviously it never really works out like that. But then Shuma Gorath reappears and becomes the main foe of Doctor Strange. While we can get into his whole villain arc with Doctor Strange, I would prefer to look at the other reality he appeared in with Earth 30847. He became an unlikely savior of Earth, and upon accepting that they thought of him as a hero, he ended up hosting a Japanese game show called the Super Monster Awesome Hour, which honestly, like, vibes.
Number 10. Thor and Hela. Starting off with an example of why the Ultimate Universe does some unnecessary stuff from time to time, Thor was forced to kill his supervillain's son to save America from civil war. But what's funny, well not funny, is that wasn't even the unnecessary part. So it begins in the aftermath of an event called Ultimatum, which we will get to much later on. Basically, Ultimate Thor ends up sacrificing his own life to save his lover, Valkyrie. While in the afterlife, in order to be reunited with and save Valkyrie, the goddess Hela makes Thor fight a whole army of undead soldiers, which he does. But then Thor asks what else he needs to do, and this goddess just starts undressing herself and demanding that Thor gives her a baby. Which, of course he does, and it doesn't even save Valkyrie. This comes back later with the child, Modi Thor's son, being raised by a much more villainous Loki, feeling abandoned and seeking revenge, trying to turn America into a new Asgard while wielding an Infinity Stone and forcing Thor to eventually strike down his own evil son. Number 9. Look what they did to my boy! Almost everyone loves Deadpool. Weirdly, even some moms love Deadpool. So when the gritty, realistic, mature Ultimate Universe was going to bring the character in, you'd expect it to be a match made in heaven. No! I blame this version of the character for the monstrosity we got 3 years later in 2009's X-Men Origins Wolverine. The Ultimate Marvel version of Deadpool was a sergeant in the military named Wadey Wilson. He's grim, he's angry, he's way too serious, and he also is an incredibly racist mutant hater. Oh, he was also a cyborg with incredible strength, he retained his signature healing factor, and instead of just being disfigured, he had no skin at all. And he's missing part of his skull, so his head is instead encased in a clear plastic case for everyone to see. Deadpool leads the Reavers, who are also racist, in trying to kill prominent mutants. Thankfully, Ultimate Deadpool was taken off the board by the 616 Deadpool in Deadpool Kills Deadpool in 2013. Number 8. Hank Pym needs to chill. Hank Pym has not really ever been that great of a dude. He has multiple untreated mental disorders and crazy insecurities that have caused him to do multiple not so great things in his time in the regular universe. But of course, everything in the Ultimate Universe gets ramped up a bit. Pym got involved in a very heated argument with his wife, Janet Van Dyne, over her friendship with Captain America. In Ultimates issue number 6, things start to get physical until the Wasp shrinks down to her smaller size to get away from her husband. Unfortunately, the terribly insecure Hank cornered her and sprayed her wasp-sized self with bug spray. She hid under a desk to catch her breath after inhaling the toxic fumes, while her husband just kept on with the emotional bombardment. But he didn't stop there. He then sent an army of ants after her until he realized what he was doing to his own wife. This stuff kind of boils my blood just a little bit. The fight resulted in Janet's very near death, her hospitalization, and his expulsion from the Ultimates. Number 7. Sasquatch. Although the Sasquatch, or Bigfoot in the real world, is a folklore monster, in Marvel he's actually Walter from down the street. Walter Lankowski, or Sasquatch, is actually a gamma mutate. The Canadians started to focus on gamma research after meeting Bruce Banner, and then specifically, he focused on the Hulk after learning Hulk was indeed Bruce. While on leave from MIT, Dr. Lankowski began working on a gamma radiation experiment that could create a being like the Hulk, only under more controlled circumstances. Being bombarded by massive amounts of gamma radiation, Walter turned into a huge, hairy, light brown creature with similar abilities to the Hulk, and after rampaging, he learned how to retain his intelligence and personality while transformed, joining Alpha Flight as their heavy hitter. More recently, he actually got possessed by Doc Samson and is now green, and technically Sasquatch is Samson, so I hope that's not too confusing, because I'm confused. Number 6. Electro 1. Alright, Electro 1 should probably be on a list of robots, but his story is so classic monster-like that I just wanted to include him. A scientist named Wilbur Poole set out to create the world's most advanced computer, but a bizarre accident caused the computer computer to become sentient. It then brainwashed Poole and forced him to build a body to house itself. When Poole had finished the body, the computer moved itself to the robot and went out into the world, rampaging, like they always do. Electro, as the people called it, came into conflict with the US military, who proved no match for the numerous powers of the robot, which included psionic force fields, gamma ray blasts, atomic manipulation of living creatures, and object levitation, while also having a robotic metal body. He was eventually defeated by his creator and then eventually found by Reed Richards, who shrunk him down and set the robot to work in the Baxter building. Electro 1 also joined the Fing Fang 4 and fought off the warlord Tim Boo Ba, which is a great sentence. Then he got confused for the villain Electro and was arrested. You should have seen that one coming though, I don't know. Number 5. Goom. Goom, the thing from Planet X. In the Tales of Suspense number 15 from October 1960, the astronomer Mark Langley wanted to see if there was life on a planet he discovered called Planet X. So, he tried to communicate with anyone through a transmitter. Unfortunately, the alien known as Goom received the transmission and followed the signal back to Earth, arriving in his ship to conquer the world. In a show of power against the world's leaders, Goom showed off some of his abilities and technology, like a time machine that could reverse someone back into a baby, a weapon that could destroy an entire mountain, or a force field that protected him from any weapon. He was even able to lift an entire city with his mind, but thankfully, the other members of his race, who were all pacifists, were contacted. They came, arrested Goom, and took him back to their planet. Number 4. Godzilla. Did you know Godzilla was a part of Marvel? He was even a part of Earth 616. Starting in May 1977, Marvel Comics published comics all about Godzilla. As some of you may know, Godzilla came to be during a Pacific nuclear bomb test in the 1950s, in Tokyo in 1956. But then, the monster became trapped in ice off the coast of Alaska. It then resurfaced in the modern day, and S.H.I.E.L.D. put together a Godzilla squad to try and take on the massive creature. It went rampaging all over America, doing battle with S.H.I.E.L.D., the Champions, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, the West Coast Avengers, a massive Red Ronin robot, and more. Using his incredible nuclear atomic fire breath, insanely durable hide, regenerative powers, and its surprising intelligence. Number 3. The Hulk. Probably the most well-known monster in Marvel Comics, if you wanted to call him that. The power of the Hulk is almost unmatched. You know the story. When testing a gamma bomb he developed, Bruce Banner rushed out into the blast radius to save Rick Jones. He was blasted with an insane amount of gamma radiation, turning him into a hulking, gray-colored beast with incredible amounts of strength, durability, stamina, regeneration, speed, adaptation, and the ability to seemingly never pass away. His rampages are the things of legend, and the Hulk was the original reason all the Avengers even came together in the first place. One of the best characters Marvel has under its roof. Number 2. Mangog. The Mangog is the physical manifestation of the strength and hatred of a billion beings belonging to a race that was completely wiped out by the ruler of Asgard, Odin. To call him powerful is a bit of an understatement. While Thor has managed to defeat Mangog, usually by tapping into the omnipotent potential of the Odin Force, as long as hate exists in the universe, Mangog will exist and grow more powerful as hate grows and festers, even during battles. He's gone toe-to-toe with Odin, who is one of the most powerful beings in the universe. In fact, Mangog is one of the few beings that Odin is actually afraid of. He's fought both Thor and Odin at the same time to the point that they were completely incapacitated. He swatted away Mjolnir like a fly and taken star-destroying weapons to the face with ease, and he's even survived being thrown into the sun with only a minor char. Number 1. Shuma Gorath. Yes, it is a giant tentacled eyeball, but hold off on the laughter because Shuma Gorath the Destroyer, the Conqueror of Midnight, the All-Killer of the Dawn, is a ridiculously ancient being and greatest of the old gods, or many-angled ones. Among his many powers is the ability to communicate with and control others nearby and across dimensions. He can create and direct powerful blasts of mystical energy and affect transmutations on a planetary scale. His skin alone is difficult to damage even with the most powerful of magic. While his form seems silly, it's actually only a shell containing his power, and he can alter his appearance and his true form is not even visible to humans. He can destroy multiple galaxies solely through his aura pressure, and Shumagorath also has the ability to destroy realities. He is most powerful in his home dimension, just like others of his kind, and only part of his power has actually appeared on Earth. And with the stuff he has done, that should tell you just how powerful he is. Coming in at number 10 is Adrian Toomes. Kicking off this list on the very mild end, we gotta start with the MCU because, as most of you know, the film and television versions of Marvel's universe have never and likely will never go to the dark depths that their comic counterparts will. Despite that though, the actors in some of these films can really serve up a small taste of darkness that can put a chill down your spine. For example, in Spider-Man Homecoming, the main antagonist is Adrian Toomes, the Vulture, played extremely and unsurprisingly well by Michael Keaton. In a really unexpected moment when Peter Parker arrives at his date Liz's house, he is greeted at the door by Adrian, Liz's father. Adrian drives the pair to their dance, and Toomes gradually figures out that Peter Parker is the Spider-Man. At the end of this car ride, Toomes actually pulls a weapon on Peter and very calmly threatens Peter with the end of his life and those he loves if Spider-Man does not back off. It's an incredibly well acted scene and makes you feel just how serious things just got for Peter Parker. Number 9. John Walker. Fast forward a little bit later on in the MCU timeline to the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now this is after Steve Rogers has stopped being Captain America. Instead, John Walker has taken up the Captain America mantle on orders from the government. As comic fans know, John Walker is not the greatest guy around, and in the MCU, it's no different. Well, maybe a little bit more restrained. A little. In one of the most shocking and dark scenes from the show, from episode 4, after the Flag Smashers caused the passing of Walker's best friend Lamar, John chases down one of the Flag Smashers and in front of a crowd of people, he very brutally uses the shield of Captain America to bring the Flag Smasher to an end. The image of the bloody shield of Captain America is such a surprising thing to see, especially out in the MCU, and it's left everyone who saw this scene for the first time slack-jawed and lost for words. Hey guys, if you are enjoying this video so far, make sure you drop a like. One way to let us know that we are doing a good job. We very much appreciate it. Number 8. Brian Banner. Fans of The Incredible Hulk are well aware of how dark and messed up the character's past is. It's a partial reason that Bruce was able to become the Hulk in the first place. A large part of his darker past has to do with Bruce's father, Brian Banner. Brian was a less than ideal father figure. For starters, because of his job researching atomic radiation, he believed that his DNA was altered and that when Bruce was born, he was some kind of monster because of it. Brian also became jealous of how much attention Rebecca Banner gave to baby Bruce. Brian went pretty much insane, in other words. As some of you know, Brian became responsible for the passing of Rebecca Banner. On the anniversary of her funeral, Bruce was visiting her grave and Brian, recently released from the mental hospital, arrived. But Brian wasn't cured at all. He attacked Bruce, but all the years of torment had built up inside of Bruce, and in one kick, Bruce threw Brian off balance and he fell backwards, hitting his head off of the gravestone of Rebecca Banner and instantly ending his life. This moment was so haunting to Bruce that he just erased it from his own mind, convincing himself for years that his father passed due to a mugging. Number 7. Making the Maker. The Fantastic Four in the Ultimate Universe remained relatively the same, at least in their family dynamics. Their backstory was slightly modified, but overall the four main heroes lived as you'd expect, until it all went Marvel Ultimate-y. First off, Sue Storm and Reed Richards lost a child together, but then Reed Richards proposed to Susan Storm and she rejected his proposal. Just like that, the Fantastic Four was no more, but that's not the end. What came next, really quickly I might add, was Reed going absolutely bonkers, faking his death, de-lifing his family, planning alien terror plots around the world, being trapped in the negative zone where he primed his intellect by stretching his brain and skull, and he built an army. Since he was horribly burnt by the Human Torch, Reed took to wearing a helmet and founded the Children of Tomorrow, the Dark Ultimates, and he called himself the Maker. He became an incredibly evil Reed Richards. Number 6. Cap hates France? Look, despite the name, Captain America, Steve Rogers, is very much a protector of the world, not just America. So it was really odd when in Ultimates number 12 from Mark Miller, Brian Hitch, and Paul Neary, we see the Ultimate Marvel Universe Captain America verbally wailing on France, of all places. Captain America is caught in a fight with Herr Kleiser, an old German rival. Just for better context, Nick Fury is there too. Captain America is obviously the hero though, so eventually he gets the upper hand. It was just so odd that when Kleiser was pinned by Cap and asking for surrender, well, Cap digs his shield into the dude's stomach and says, "Surrender? Surrender? You think this letter on my head stands for France?" The comment was kind of fueled by the time period it was written in, as the states were entering into a war and France refused to join them, leading to some anti-France feelings in the real world. But this World War II era dig at the country left a bad taste in pretty much everyone's mouth, especially from a character that is supposed to be much, much better than that. Number 5. Wolverine. Why are you so weird? Look, I'm gonna get into all the weirdness that is the Ultimate Universe Wolverine in a sec, but one thing that kind of immediately sticks out is how this version of Wolverine seems to repeatedly swing for ladies that are a little below his age bracket, or like a lot below, and always redheads, which I guess kind of checks out from the 616 version too. Jean Grey, Firestar, and the one we're talking about today, Mary Jane Watson. In Ultimate Spider-Man number 66, Wolverine and Peter Parker end up switching bodies after Wolverine makes some unwanted advances on the teenage Jean Grey, who psychically swapped their bodies. I don't know why she did that, but she did it. Wolverine finds some drawbacks, but apparently they pale in comparison to the perk that is the teenage Peter's girlfriend, Mary Jane. Wolverine tells MJ that he, in Peter's body, doesn't need to go to school, while also making some crude advances towards her as well. It comes off as kinda creepy and really cringy. Number 4. Wolverine. How you die. Now, on the topic of Wolverine, he himself has quite a few moments that make him kinda awesome and some that make him kinda horrible. Ultimate Wolverine is no longer feral, and he does not have the classic healing factor. Instead, he gets the survival factor, which is kind of a heck of a lot better. He can survive a heck of a lot, almost anything. S.H.I.E.L.D. chopped his body off, leaving only his head, and he breathed through his skin. They put his head in a vacuum and he went into stasis. Hulk ripped his body and threw it into another mountain range, and when Wolverine found that half, it was still fresh, no organ failure, no rot, and the blood was somehow still pumping. And he just put himself back together again with no issues. Ultimate Wolverine is unkillable by any means, no matter what you do. It was also implied that Ultimate Wolverine was the precursor of all mutants. He was sort of the first mutant in the world. So all the other mutants are basically products of Weapon X experimentation on Wolverine. On top of that, his blood could be synthesized into a substance that gives mutants insane power boosts. Marvel made Ultimate Wolverine insanely overpowered, and then they absolutely killed him in the stupidest way possible. He died because Magneto did a hand wave thingamajig, as someone on Reddit said, and apparently he destroyed every single one of Wolverine's cells while ripping out his adamantium. Number 3. Is this Game of Thrones? If you haven't noticed by some of the previous points, Marvel did a lot of unnecessary sexualizing of the Ultimate Universe. And to just push it a bit further into unnecessary odd choices made by Marvel for this universe, they included the incestuous relationship between the characters of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. Somehow it actually feels worse than the one in Game of Thrones, maybe just because it was extremely shocking and the two characters never had anything even similar to this in the 616 continuity. Fans wondered whether it was really necessary for Mark Miller to pair the two characters together and questioned whether the twist added anything new to the story at all. Answer: it didn't. Probably the biggest issue with this revelation is that now the characters can't so much as look at each other without fans accusing the writers of returning to the incest plot from the Ultimate X-Men. Number 2. Blob. After the events of that ultimatum thing, which I'm so close to talking about, many heroes were taken out and or unaccounted for. One such hero would be Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp. Now, as we know, Hank Pym, Ant-Man, was kind of the worst. And though a terrible husband, he still diligently looked for his missing wife. What he found instead was the villain the Blob feasting on her remains. It's probably one of the most striking images from the whole Ultimate Universe, but it just gets stranger and somehow worse. Enraged at the sight of it, Ant-Man converted to his giant man state and picked up the Blob in his giant hand and bit Blob's head clean off and spat it on the ground to the shock and horror of his teammates. And in at number 1 is Ultimatum. Ultimatum ultimatum was supposed to be how the writers finished off the Ultimate Universe stories. Obviously it didn't turn out that way, but as you can tell from previous points, writers kinda just went a little haywire with things they would do with a dying universe story. Basically, Magneto, who has been a pretty brutal villain in this universe so far, goes even farther during the Mega event where stakes were way high. Basically, after Magneto gains control of the Hammer of Thor and is manipulated by none other than Dr. Doom, he messes with the magnetic pillars of the world, flipping them on their head and sending weather into a frenzy. The big event was a giant tsunami called the Ultimatum Wave that basically put New York underwater and brought a giant casualty list along with it. Bruce Banner drowns, but the Hulk lives, the Wasp gets eaten, as mentioned before, and Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are killed off. In a bit more of a divisive move, while the X-Men are looking for their fallen teammates in the wake of the tidal wave in New York, Magneto pays a visit to Professor X and in a pretty brutal scene, snaps the professor's neck. Magneto also rips the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton and pretty much disintegrates him like we talked about before. And at number 10 is Werewolf by Night. Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night, made his Marvel debut in 1971's Marvel Spotlight number 2. He was actually born in Transylvania as Jacob Rusoff. Russell is a descendant of Grigory Rusoff, who in 1795 was turned into a werewolf after fighting Dracula. Grigory managed to keep the curse dormant for many generations until it was reactivated by Jack's grandfather, Gregor, using powers from a copy of the Darkhold. When under the full moon, the curse turns Gregor and his descendants into werewolves with supernatural abilities including enhanced strength, stamina, agility, reflexes, speed, senses, and durability, with a regenerative healing factor, but a weakness of silver. In his solo series from 1972, Jack fights threats like Dracula and enemies that either want to steal his abilities or steal his family's copy of the Darkhold. He even came into a famous conflict in issue number 32 in May of 1975 that introduced Moon Knight to Marvel Comics. He is also soon to be a part of the MCU alongside a few other monsters. Number 9. Franken Castle. After he was killed by Daken on orders from Norman Osborn during the Dark Reign event, Frank Castle, yes, the Punisher, was revived by the Legion of Monsters as an undead zombie-like monster known as Franken Castle. The Legion resurrected Frank to recruit him in their fight against the villain known as Hellsguard, who was systematically killing off monsters using samurai-like assassins. Although he originally refused to help, Frank got involved after seeing innocent younger monsters being dispatched too, and that is not something Frank is willing to abide. So he went on to slay hordes of Hellsguard's men. It's honestly an incredibly interesting moment in Frank Castle's history, and it got this version of Frank moved to Earth 666. He also nearly enacted revenge against Daken, being stopped by Wolverine before he was returned to his human form through the Bloodstone. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video and you aren't already subscribed, be sure to slap that subscribe button to see more lists and explanation videos all about comic book characters. Number 8. Nkonthu the Living Mummy. Nkonthu was the leader of a very strong tribe in the Sub-Sahara that was enslaved by the Egyptians around 3,000 years ago. After he led a revolt against the pharaoh and even took the pharaoh's life with a spear, Nkonthu was paralyzed by the pharaoh's sorcerer and mummified, but made immortal so as to suffer as a living mummy. Now, fast forward to the 20th century and the living mummy regained the ability to move again, and he clawed his way out of his slumber and terrorized Cairo until he was eventually seemingly defeated. Only not really, because he came back. The living mummy has actually acted as a hero as well. Quite a bit, honestly, helping out on many teams using his super strength, stamina, and durability, plus a form of immortality that doesn't let him die from anything except some physical attacks. Also, after being charged by Anubis, Nkonthu has apparently gained the ability to draw souls from sentient beings. Number 7. Spider-Man and Mary Jane. Spider-Man is arguably the face of Marvel Comics, and for good reason too. He's incredibly inspiring, full of hope, and is never one to give up. For all those reasons, when Spider-Man Reign was released in 2007, it was incredibly hard to see an old, tired, and torn down Peter Parker who had pretty much given up. Of all the dark and depressing things in this story, there is one thing that stands above the rest. So, through the course of the story, we learn that Mary Jane, Peter Parker's greatest love interest, has passed away, and he's been hanging on to this memory of her, and that's likely due to the fact that he is directly responsible. Mary Jane didn't pass away because of a villain or Peter failing to save her. Instead, because of the radioactive spider that gave him his abilities, Peter himself was radioactive. Through the years and years that Peter Parker and Mary Jane had been together, Peter's radioactive body had essentially given Mary Jane cancer. We learn this as Peter is hugging her decaying body and bawling his eyes out. It's honestly utterly gut-wrenching. Number 6. Green Goblin and Gwen Stacy. Sticking with Spider-Man, because apparently putting Spider-Man through the ringer is Marvel's speciality, we have Sins Past. In this story, it was revealed that Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, who was a full-grown man at the time, had actually had an affair with the teenage Spider-Man's other love interest, Gwen Stacy. Not only that, but Norman actually knocked her up with twins. Norman whisked Gwen off to France so that she could give birth, but filled with guilt, Gwen decided to come clean and tell Peter Parker everything. But Norman was absolutely not going to allow that to happen, which was the reason that the Green Goblin, who had barely ever shared any comic time with Gwen Stacy before this point, chose to infamously put her life in peril, and it's the whole reason she lost her life in the first place. It's incredibly unnecessary and completely tears down the memory of Gwen. Number 5. Sentry and Ares. The Sentry is a character that deserves more light. The problem is he is kind of the most powerful superhero Marvel has. Obviously that's debatable, but this guy has the power to destroy pretty much anybody in the Marvel universe. For example, he has reassembled his own molecules and taken out the Molecule Man. But it's the fight between the Sentry and Ares, the literal god of war, in issue 2 of Siege that really left me sitting there going, did that actually just happen? Through the course of the story, Ares has been showing just how awesome he is, and he turns his sights on Norman Osborn, which unfortunately means Ares now has to face his friend, the Sentry. Sentry punches Ares halfway across Asgard, and maybe 2 or 3 punches later, he grabs both ends of the God of War and rips him completely in half. Not only did it leave everyone on the page frozen, it also left readers completely stunned. Number 4. The Hulk and Tigra. In 1995, Marvel released The Last Avengers story, and with a title like that, from 1995, you can imagine it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Side note, the art in this comic is actually really good, which actually made it worse watching this version of the Incredible Hulk turn against his fellow Avengers, Wonder Man, Hawkeye, Mockingbird, and Tigra. Tigra against the Hulk is not a fight you would normally expect, and this Hulk tells you why, as in her attack against the Green Goliath, Hulk simply grabs her and pulls her apart just like Sentry did with Ares. Number 3. The Punisher. The Punisher could probably make up almost every single spot on this list, but that wouldn't make a very compelling collection of horrible moments, now would it? No. So, I'm going to pick just one. Punisher, being a regular guy, has to come up with some pretty inventive ways of dispatching criminals and super criminals. Usually that involves weaponry, but he's tossed a guy to a great white shark or to the wolves in a zoo, he's disintegrated the Hulk with magic, and even smothered a guy with a much larger guy. A close second is when he took down the Wolverine by parking a steamroller on top of him, but number 1 would have to be when he faced the entire Marvel universe. In this alternate world, it's a superhero battle, not crime, that brings a close to his family. Because of that, Frank Castle took down everyone. It's the final fight with Daredevil though that really hits. It's a slogfest, and Frank doesn't realize what he's done till Matt Murdock pulls off his mask before he passes on, which prompts Frank to turn on himself, leaving us readers feeling completely distraught. Number 2. Ultimatum. The Marvel Ultimate Universe. An ultimate collection of bizarre choices, really. Chief among them would have to be the event that was supposed to bring the universe to an end, but instead just did a whole bunch of really brutal stuff. And then it just kind of carries on. I'm talking about Ultimatum. In this event, Magneto, lacking any of his 616 universe counterpart's moral compass, flips the magnetic poles of the Earth. Now this causes incredibly bad weather, tidal waves, and the de-lifing of millions of people. But if that wasn't bad enough, in the ensuing chaos caused by the Ultimatum wave, the Blob devours Janet Van Dyne, Hank Pym in his giant form chomps the Blob's head off for revenge, Captain America ends up on life support, Thor trades his life and soul for Val Valkyries in the Land of the Dead, Magneto uses Iron Man's and Cyclops' power to brutally obliterate Wolverine, and then Magneto screams and raves until Cyclops blows his head off with an I-beam. It was all just a lot. And in at number 1 is Marvel Ruins. If you know Marvel Ruins, then you had to know that this was going to be number 1. This is a story taking place in an alternate comic book universe where literally everything that could go wrong goes wrong. Similar to Ultimatum, it's just kind of best to list off the events rather than get specific here. The Fantastic Four spacecraft crashes into Earth and Ben Grimm is left with survivor's guilt. The Incredible Hulk is not so incredible as the gamma radiation he experienced leaves him as a hulking mass of tumors and deformity. Thanks to the radioactive spider, Spider-Man did not gain the abilities of a spider, but instead developed an incredibly brutal mutant virus that left him with a terrible skin rash and had him captured and quarantined by the government. The Scarlet Witch betrayed the Avengers to the government, leading to the Quinjet being blown up with them all inside of it. Nick Fury was introduced to the idea of eating other people by Captain America. Silver Surfer suffocated in space. Johnny Blaze sets himself on fire as a stunt and goes out in the same stunt, and Magneto's powers go out of control in an airport. The whole story just leaves you wondering what you're supposed to do with your life now.
Number 10. Undead Brother Voodoo. This version of Brother Voodoo hails from Earth 666, ooh spooky, where he is part of the Undead Avengers team. While still technically a hero, he's also still technically a monster. The Avengers of Earth 666 are all considered members of the Undead, with each of them technically being some kind of monster, some version of Undead, if you will. Jericho Drum in this universe appears to be some kind of poltergeist-like ghost from his appearance here. I don't know if he's specifically a poltergeist, I just think of him that way because of his glowiness. I don't know, it reminds me of the movie Poltergeist. This team, including the ghostly Brother Voodoo, make their first appearance in issue number 33 of the Secret Avengers series, where they tangle with Secret Avengers members Captain Britain and Clint Barton's Hawkeye of Earth 616.
Number 9, Groot. Before he was the mainstay lovable space ent in Guardians of the Galaxy with a raccoon-shaped compatriot, Groot was actually an evil, monstrous tree. He first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 13 in 1960. The tagline in the comic itself was, quote, "Where Groot walks, death follows." He was also entirely obscure before being thrust into the pop culture fandom when Marvel decided to turn their C-list team, Guardians of the Galaxy, into a phenomenally massive success. He was originally a throwaway monster, and his original comic, before 2012, was worth $2,868, which isn't small by any means, but after the movies premiered, it was worth $19,000. In the comic, Groot belongs to a species called Floral Colossus, although they're also just called Groots too. During his early life, the Floral Colossi rule over Planet X, and Groot was an outcast amongst his people. He became friends with the inferior species called the Undergrowth, a fungi-like species also on the planet. Groot is eventually forced to flee his homeworld after he kills another Colossus while defending an Undergrowth. Before the movies, Groot also appeared in 2 other comics, one being The Incredible Hulk, where he more so resembles his original appearance rather than the huggable tree we know today. The Hulk comic released in 1976, and then lastly he was in Annihilation Conquest number 6 in 2008. It was the first appearance of Groot as his modern rendition, smaller, skinnier, a bit more approachable than the Godzilla-style tree we knew before. He also joined the Guardians of the Galaxy lineup in this comic alongside Star-Lord, Drax the Destroyer, and Rocket Raccoon.
Number 8. Ultimate Hulk. Let's be real, when I think of multiversal monster versions of the Hulk, I often think of Ultimate Hulk of Earth 1610, aka the Ultimate Universe. Here, Hulk was less a hero and more just, kind of a brute. In fact, at one point, the Ultimates, who are basically this Earth's version of the Avengers, even had to fight against, not with the Hulk. The Hulk would eventually go on to join the Ultimates team, I'll give him that, but let's not forget that he's a cannibalistic beast who also makes some of the most violent threats when he's angry. Even Bruce Banner wasn't as altruistic in this universe, initially hoping to create the next super soldier serum so that he might be able to increase his own strength and power. However, instead he created a Hulk serum, which turned him into the Hulk because he was all about testing that serum on himself. It's even implied that during his first transformation that he may have actually caused the death of Mary and Richard Parker, the parents of Spider-Man. Peter Parker, so yeah.
Number 7. Sauron. Calling him a monster is a little unfair, but also not really. As a child, Dr. Carl Lycos was attacked by a mutated pterodon and somehow became an energy vampire, forced to absorb the life energy from animals and humans in order to survive. However, after absorbing energy from the mutant Havoc, the energy triggered his metamorphosis into a creature that resembled a half-humanoid pterodon, who retained his human intelligence and the ability to speak. However, the transformation distorted Lycos' personality, turning him evil. Hence, Lycos took the name Sauron after the arch-villain of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. He has come into many conflicts and alliances with various mutants, including the X-Men over his history, and he eventually became conqueror of the Savage Land, which is a hidden refuge for dinosaurs nestled in the modern Antarctic. Number 6. Morbius. Yes, it is indeed Morbin time, my friends. As probably one of the most frequently occurring and now most memed Marvel monsters, Michael Morbius is a prominent figure for monsters and mystical beings in Marvel Comics. Suffering from a rare blood disease, Morbius turned to a cure that used vampire bat DNA. Now this mutated him into a blood-sucking creature of the night and a pseudo-vampire, with all the perks of vampirism minus the drawback, except for looking utterly terrifying. He was at first a villain doing battle against the likes of Spider-Man and of course Blade, but he eventually became a conflicted hero, using his abilities to help others while battling his bloodlust and trying to cure himself of his curse. Number 5. Dracula. Moving from a pseudo-vampire to the lord of all vampires. Dracula is an incredibly old vampire, sorcerer, and nobleman who became the supreme ruler of all vampires while also being the most powerful vampire of all time. The Wallachian Count Vlad turned himself into a vampire in order to face the invading Ottoman forces in the 1400s. Now minus the abilities native to most vampires, including superhuman attributes, hypnotism, immortality, and shapeshifting, Vlad is a sorcerer, and he has even the ability to control the weather to a degree that can even oppose both Storm of the X-Men and the god Thor. Recently, he has declared the site and surrounding area of Chernobyl the Vampire Kingdom. He used this seat of power to steal the blood of Wolverine that allowed Dracula to survive in sunlight for a limited time. But he has done so much more during his long run in Marvel Comics starting in 1950. Number 4. Fin Fang Foom. He whose limbs shatter mountains and whose back scrapes the sun. Fin Fang Foom is a member of a race of shape-shifting aliens from a world called Kakaranthara, or if you prefer the much easier Maklu 4. Foom was the navigator of the spacecraft that landed on Earth in ancient China, and he volunteered himself to be put in a tomb in a deep slumber to serve as a backup plan for the other Makluans to conquer Earth. Fin Fang Foom looks a lot like a kind of humanized Chinese dragon when he is in his natural form, and is a massive shapeshifter from anywhere between 32 to 255 feet. As a dragon and alien, he possesses super strength, stamina, durability, and longevity, as well as telepathy and flight, spiritual possession, energy assimilation, acid mists, and potential transmogrification abilities. He has fought and allied with so many different heroes over his time, including a hilarious fight with the Hulk where he was thrown to the moon. Number 3. Zenmu. The alien cybernetic monster Zenmu is an incredibly intelligent being with a huge amount of strength and power. Introduced in Marvel Comics in 1960's Journey into Mystery, he is one of the first monsters introduced, and he even predates the Fantastic Four. Zenmu is able to cast hypnotic rays that can control the entire human population. He can use telekinesis, scatter his atoms, and even inhabit host bodies. In other words, Zenmu is incredibly powerful. Most recently, Zenmu was a foe to the Hulk in the Immortal Hulk series. He was hired by the Roxxon company to ruin the Hulk's public image by creating disasters and swooping in to save the day. Zenmu used his hypnotic powers to persuade civilians and even close friends and allies of the Hulk to turn their backs on him. Thankfully though, the Hulk managed to break free of his control, and he actually completely destroyed Zenmu. Coming in at number 2 is Man-Thing. Ted Sallis was a scientist first assigned to something called Project Sulfur, in which he created a serum that made people immune to all toxic biochemicals. but it also, unfortunately, turned them into monsters. This serum was called SO2. However, Silas had to flee from forces who desired his formula for their own nefarious purposes. He injects himself with the serum, but after crashing in a specific swamp and dying, he is transformed into a swamp creature through a combination of this formula and magical forces existing in the area. As Man-Thing, Ted is practically invincible. He can be destroyed, but as long as there is vegetation on Earth, he grows back his body. Depending on the situation, his super strength is possibly limitless. He has fought against the Hulk, the Thing, and the entire Marvel Champions team. Man-Thing also has the ability to teleport around the Earth using Nexus points. He can breathe underwater and can't really be held captive, as he can just ooze past objects, like if you locked him behind bars, he can just walk through the bars. The last of his powers consists of detecting emotions. Positive emotions make him feel calm and reserved, but negative feelings make him go ballistic, making him secrete an ooze that can burn almost anything, including Luke Cage's skin. Man-Thing is also capable of controlling the nexus of all realities. During Fear itself, Man-Thing's power increased, releasing him from the bond to the nexus of all realities and allowing him to teleport wherever he wishes at will, and later his powers grow so great that he is able to manipulate reality. Also, Man-Thing is one of the few beings shown to be naturally immune to the Marvel Zombies plague. And in at number 1 is Jormungand. According to Norse legend, Jormungand is the son of Loki and the Jotunheim sorceress Angerboda. Realizing the danger that Jormungand posed to the gods of Asgard, Odin, the ruler of the realm of Asgard, banished Jormungand to the depths of the ocean of Earth, or Midgard. Now Jormungand not only survived in the oceans, but grew to an incredible size. At his full size, Jormungand was big enough to encircle the entire planet, and Jormungand became known as the Midgard Serpent. It was prophesied that on the day of Ragnarok, when it is said that most of the gods of Asgard will pass away, that Odin's son Thor will kill the Midgard Serpent, but Thor himself would die as a result of the Midgard Serpent's venom. So, we know the Midgard Serpent's venom can kill Asgardian gods, but by compressing his coils around the planet, he could also magically cause storms, earthquakes, and other disasters. He was also usually in an ethereal form, making him invisible and intangible to humans, but if he came out of this form fully, he would destroy a lot of stuff on Earth. So it's kinda good that he stays that way. In battles he has had with Thor, only a part of him ceased to be ethereal, and that one part was absolutely massive. Becoming visible also froze time while he and Thor battled. Thor and beings as strong as him are the only ones capable of defeating the serpent, but Thor is the only one to have actually done it. Number 10. Black Widow and Iron Man. A change in the Ultimate Universe that actually made sense in my head for some reason was the relationship between Tony Stark and Black Widow. Shortly after Iron Man joined the S.H.I.E.L.D.-sponsored Ultimates team, he and Natalia Romanova struck up their relationship, and it went so far the two eventually got engaged, with Tony even giving Black Widow her own nanite-controlled suit of armor, which did look really cool by the way. But the happy couple didn't last too long, as it turned out that Natalia was actually a traitor, working for the Liberators, which is a whole other thing we could talk about. After she turned on Tony, she managed to end the life of his longtime butler and close friend Jarvis. Kind of an unredeemable act there. So it didn't feel so bad when Tony used the nanites inside Natalia's body, the ones used to control that fancy new armor, to paralyze her and steal information from her brain about the Liberators and her betrayal. And then he knocks her unconscious with a wine bottle, giving her brain damage. There was also this whole raunchy video that got leaked of the two, which just felt completely random to me, but hey, it happens. Number 9. Black Panther. A lot of stuff in the Ultimate Universe I can look past, but I gotta say I don't like what they did to Black Panther here. You see, in the Ultimate Universe, T'Challa Udaku, the youngest son of King T'Chaka, when he became jealous of his older brother M'Baku, who was set to take on the Panther Trials, T'Challa decided to secretly go do it himself. What are the Panther Trials? Well, it basically involves hunting and defeating an actual panther in combat. So yeah, the young T'Challa ain't ready for that kind of thing, and he loses badly, with the panther actually tearing out T'Challa's throat. Being brought back to Wakanda, he undergoes 16 hours of surgery, and even then, the supposedly super advanced nation is not able to save him. So of course, they turn to the United States of America. Specifically, they turn to the super reliable Weapon X program. Now, Weapon X is able to save T'Challa, minus his vocal cords, but similar to Wolverine, they give him mutant abilities that enhance his strength, speed, stamina, agility, night vision, and they even give him retractable bone claws, and then give him the title of Black Panther. He is then put under the control of Nick Fury, who refuses to let him go back to Wakanda, makes him the property of the United States, and has him trained under Captain America. Now there is more to this story, but taking the awesome culture-rich Wakandan hero and making him a sort of Wolverine clone who can't speak and is the property of the United States government just kinda feels wrong, man. Number 8. Victor Von what? This point is going to cover one very small thing. For the ultimate version of Doctor Doom, I honestly don't have much issue with the changes they implemented. The metal skin, the goat legs, the backstory change, even what they did to his kingdom, it's alright, I guess, for me. One thing I cannot abide is changing his last name to have him seemingly related to a real-world action star. Victor Van Damme? Van Damme? Why? Who do these buffoons think they are? Sorry, I'm getting a little worked up here. He was also way more of a petty character than he was an extremely dangerous villain. Luckily, that changed slightly before the Ultimate Run came to an end, but the damage was done. Let's just move on.
Number 7. Zombie Scarlet Witch. On Earth 2149, things were relatively similar to Earth 616 until one day, a traveler from an alternate dimension showed up at Avengers Mansion, warning of the Earth's impending doom at the hands of an army of the dead. Who was this interdimensional traveler? None other than the groovy Ash Williams from the Evil Dead franchise. The heroes ignore this strange and irritating man, but soon after they discover that the threat is real and they are bitten by the zombie horde and transformed into the living dead. Ash eventually teams up with Earth's Scarlet Witch and Dazzler to try and find the Book of the Dead and save the Earth, but Wanda was eventually bitten by a zombified Punisher and turned into a zombie herself. Now, in the zombie universe, there are plenty of zombie heroes to choose from, such as Captain America, Spider-Man, and even Howard the Duck. But for this list, we decided to go with Scarlet Witch, as her incredible powers make her a terrifying force to be reckoned with under the best of circumstances. But the idea of all that power having an insatiable taste for human flesh is even worse.
Number 6. Ice Giant Thor. In What If Thor in 2018, we got the story of what if Thor was raised by frost giants. Laufey, the king of the frost giants, defeats Odin in their battle so long ago, and just as Odin took the infant Loki, Laufey takes the kid Thor and raises him as his own. Loki is obviously here as well, and like usual, they form a pretty tight bond as adopted brothers. Unfortunately, due to Thor's strength and skill in battle, not to mention his fondness for summoning the power of lightning, he is praised among the frost giants and by Laufey himself, who begins to completely forget Loki, his actual true son. Instead, Loki finds the captured Freya in the dungeons and she teaches him how to use magic. Loki eventually busts her out of prison and together they attempt to escape to Midgard. They go to the ruins of Asgard and attempt to repair the Rainbow Bridge until Thor and Laufey show up. Loki ends the life of his father while Thor unknowingly ends his mother with a blast from his giant ice hammer, Ice Crusher. Thor almost takes out his brother as well, but at the last minute, he lets him go. We don't know what happens next, only that Loki went to Midgard, had kids and a family, and apparently became a hero. It actually ends on a rather sweet note.
Number 5. Vampire Daredevil. When Magneto's ultimatum wave devastated New York in the Ultimate Universe, one of the victims of the flood was the original Daredevil, Matt Murdock. Feeling that Hell's Kitchen needed its champion, Murdock's old mentor, Stick, sought out Raymond Connor to become Matt's replacement. Like Matt, Raymond was blinded in an accident and developed similar abilities. After being trained by Stick, Raymond took on the Daredevil mantle, using a yellow and red variation of Matt's red costume. This new hero's career was cut extremely short when he was bitten by a vampire version of the Nerd Hulk. This turned the new Daredevil into a terrifying and effective vampire, even managing to bite Captain America and defeat Blade in combat. Thankfully, before he could land the killing blow, he was teleported to Iran, where he perished in the sun.
Number 4. Steel Corpse. In Marvel's Age of X universe, the X-Men never existed to represent mutants, and as a result, the mutant population had become the ultimate ultimate enemy. In response to this, the mutant Magneto used his powers to literally steal buildings from New York and form Fortress X, a safe haven for mutant kind. This led to the creation of a team of non-mutant heroes by General Frank Castle and led by Captain America to hunt down this resistance of mutants. Among the members of this team was a version of Iron Man named Steel Corpse. This Iron Man had become infected by a technological virus that fused him with his armor. Inside the armor, Iron Man has slowly been digested by the suit over the decades since he was trapped inside. The worst part is that this group of Avengers eventually decided that they weren't going to attack the mutants who were just trying to survive. So the government takes control of Steel Corpse and forces the suit to attack. It's twisted, it's sick, and it's absolutely terrifying to imagine being slowly consumed by a suit of armor you can literally never escape.
Number 3, the Maker. Despite having his flaws, Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four is an important and heroic figure in the Marvel Universe. Despite his heroics, we did witness a spectacular fall from grace for Reed in the Ultimate Comics universe, otherwise known as Earth 1610. In this universe, Magneto created a doomsday weapon called the Ultimatum Wave, which caused a tidal wave that killed thousands of people. This, combined with the stress of the Fantastic Four breaking up and Sue Storm rejecting his marriage proposal, caused Reed to snap and blow up his childhood home to fake his death, killing his family in the process. He went on to use aliens under his control to attack the heroes. He was eventually defeated and disfigured by the Human Torch and flung into the negative zone. Reed returned to Earth and took on the identity of the Maker and set out on a twisted quest to make the world perfect. He killed all the Asgardians in an attempt to understand Thor's power and used antimatter to attack Washington, D.C., killing POTUS, his cabinet, and all of Congress. The Maker went on to do a lot of twisted stuff, fighting the heroes of his own Earth as well as the heroes of Earth 616, proving that if not kept in check by a strong moral compass, Mr. Fantastic's amazing mind can be the ultimate source of terror.
Number 2, Space Punisher Hulk. Space Punisher Hulk has only appeared in 2 comic books, but despite that, he has shown that he is completely terrifying. For starters, he is a completely separate entity from Bruce Banner, whose body is literally trapped inside Space Punisher Hulk. This means that nothing that happens to Bruce Banner affects the Hulk. Space Punisher Hulk, while having all the powers of the Hulk, also has an extra set of arms and is quite a bit taller. He is described as a destructive killing machine, well known for destroying spaceships, defeating the Fantastic Four, ripping off the Thing's hand and tying up Mr. Fantastic in a knot in the process. He has taken out Doc Samson with his own hair, bit straight through Sabretooth, and de-lifed Deadpool by literally tearing off his head, which shouldn't actually work, but I digress. He defeated and ended the lives of 6 Watchers single-handedly, he broke the leader's back in combat, and he also ripped out Bruce Banner from his own chest. He is virtually invulnerable, seemingly indestructible and invincible. He can move faster than light and pass through barriers of existence and reality. The Hulk is scary on a regular day. Space Punisher Hulk? No thanks, I'm good.
Number 1, Spider-Man. On Earth 11,580, Peter Parker was taking a tour of a lab that was conducting radiation experiments on a colony of spiders. Peter fell into the spider habitat and was promptly devoured by the spiders. In an odd twist of fate not dissimilar to the villain Swarm, the spiders absorbed Peter's consciousness and became a hive mind that formed together to masquerade as a human and fight crime, thus becoming Spider-Man. Spider-Man fought crime for a time, but soon developed a taste for human flesh. The spiders managed to hide this for a time and were recruited by the superior Spider-Man in his multiversal quest to defeat the villainous Inheritors. He eventually betrayed Otto by joining forces with the Norman Osborn Spider-Man of Earth 44,145 to try and destroy the Web of Life. This plan failed, but Spider-Man did manage to spread his spiders across the multiverse, giving them a foothold in every different reality.